Welcome to today's episode of Insights with Us. I'm Anastasia, a licensed professional counselor, owner of Happy Mind Wellness Company, a Colorado based therapy practice, and creator of this podcast. My goal is to use this platform to help others find their voice as we share our journeys and show support as we learn more about ourselves and life. Growth happens when we get uncomfortable, which happens when we sit with new ideas we haven't sat with before. I hope that we can work on this journey of personal growth and understanding together. As a disclaimer, there may be swearing in this podcast, but sometimes we get caught up in the human experience. It happens. And sometimes we talk about difficult or activating topics. So maybe put on some headphones if you need to, and remember that support exists for you if you want it. This episode is incredibly special and meaningful to me because you get to hear me catch up with one of the people who influenced my journey and my mental health. He is a school counselor. He was my school counselor in Indonesia. He was my softball coach, and he is the one that helped me find confidence in myself when I was really struggling to understand my place in the world. And now I got the chance to connect with him as an adult. I got to hear his story, and he was gracious enough to record the whole thing for all of you. We talk about mental health, growth, breaking free of thought spirals, and so much more. So with that said, please enjoy this episode with Mr. Gathercole, and let's see if we can build some insight today. Welcome to this space. Welcome to Insights with Us. Welcome back in my life. I am just so excited that you are here right now.
I am too. I'm really glad to be back in touch with you.
Yeah. So right before we hit record, like I said, I want to hear your story because I never really got to. I knew kind of where you lived. I kind of knew where you were from. But so you're a school counselor. You did international school counseling. Like,
Mhm.
how did this even become a thing in your life? How did you choose this path?
Well, I was a teacher first and taught for 6 years,
What did you
uh,
teach?
music and social studies. Now
Oh.
there's a combination for you, right? And I was a softball coach, as you know,
Mhm.
and I liked the teaching. Um, but as I did more teaching and more coaching, I was just drawn to the personal side of it and the motivation side of it. Like you said before, um, what makes people tick.
Mhm.
Um, how does how does my brain work? And and how just the fascination with how the brain works and how people work and that personal connection that you can form. Um, among a lot of other things, coaches guide players. They help them work through their fears and help them discover what they're capable of. I know that doesn't sound very sporty, but there's a lot of that in coaching. Um, you know what I mean. So that's why I went into counseling. It's the connections. It was an evolutionary process.
So you were a teacher for 6 years before you went back to school for counseling?
I did, yeah. It was a 2-year program for school counseling. It was a master's.
Okay. And where was that? Like, where did you start?
Well, we were um, in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan,
Okay.
and anybody who knows Michigan would say that's kind of like no man's land up there. And I had a job, and but Betsy didn't. And it became apparent to us after a year or so that she wasn't going to get a job there because it's a small school in a small town, and nobody left. They just
Mhm.
stayed there and liked it there. So we started looking somewhere else. We came across this announcement for uh, this school needed teachers. This school in Norway. It was an American school. So we said, what the heck? Let's apply and let's do the interview and see what happens. And turns out we got the jobs, and we said, okay, it's a 2-year contract. Let's go overseas for those 2 years, and then we'll come back and settle down in
That's what
Michigan.
my dad said.
Yeah.
Did not
Yeah. I
happen.
think it's a common thing for people who work overseas.
Mhm.
And 32 years later, we came back and settled down. So
Where all did you live?
we lived in Norway for 6 years total.
Okay.
And then you, I'll tell you the story later, but then we moved to Egypt for 10 years,
Okay.
Prague for 4 years, and then, as you know, Indonesia for 12 years.
Which is how we met.
Yeah.
Okay. And so, I mean, I know from the student side what it was like living in different countries and kind of settling. What was it like teaching in each of those places? Like, how did it compare?
Well, first, having lived in Norway, which is completely orderly and pristine and a happy place, it's
Mhm.
always in one of the most happiest countries in the world. Peaceful, honest, joyful people. The police didn't carry guns when we were there, so it was safe as well. Well, then we got jobs in Egypt, and we got in late at night on the airplane, and there was someone there to take us to our apartment. And the ride to our apartment was through heavy traffic, honking, donkey carts, vendors selling their wares, people everywhere, and lots of dust in the air. Betsy was crazy. She would say, "Oh God, look at that. Oh, isn't that cool? Oh gosh." And I was just watching, staring. You can tell who the adventurous one is in our marriage. And so we got into the apartment, and I sat down on the couch, put my head in my hands, and said, "What have we done?"
So different from Norway.
Contrast was so different. Well, we ended up staying for 10 years.
Mm.
We came to know the people, their way of life, their kindness in Egypt, and more. And then we lived in Prague and Indonesia. And we had learned by that time, okay, a book is not necessarily its cover.
Mhm.
So take a look, have some experiences, and then, just
Yeah.
don't judge at first.
When you were in Egypt, did you work at Cairo American College or were you at a
Yes.
different school?
No,
Okay.
that was the one.
Yeah. Okay.
And in
And
those days, I was a middle school counselor. And that's an experience all in and of itself.
in what way?
Oh, just as opposed to high school counseling. Um, just such a difficult, different stage of life. There's angst in high school, as you know, and people going through things. Um, but in middle school, everything seems catastrophic.
Because it's like the first time anyone's ever going through any of this.
Yeah, that's right. And I'll tell you what, there's bullying in different at different levels of education, but I'm not sure there's any kind of bullying like a middle school student can do or endure. So interactions are huge to students and at that point, and
Mhm.
fitting in is huge. So, and yet they don't have necessarily the maturity to process all that like a high school student can. So that was adventurous by
Mm.
itself. But the same rewards are there. If you can help somebody think through what's going on and you can see that light bulb go on, that's terrific.
Yeah. Do you have particular moments that stand out to you as those light bulb moments, like the memories or particular students, or I don't even know, like what stands out to you in your career?
There was one student in specifically I'm thinking of right now in Indonesia, and I was coaching softball, and we needed a pitcher. And when you're a coach and you choose people for different positions, especially the important ones, you have to look into it's not just physical ability, it's also a big piece is mental. You can teach people the physical part of softball, but it's real hard to teach them the confidence and the mental part. So we needed a pitcher, and I don't know if I approached her or I said, "You're going to be it." Um, and there was a lot of self-doubt whether or not she could. handle her, whether or not she could do this. Um, and we talked a lot, and we put her out there and gave some experience, and she became really good at it. And you know who I'm talking about, of course.
Well, of course. That's why I invited you on this podcast. So you could talk
Well,
me
so
up, you know?
all the listeners can know it's you. So that was one good experience, and that's the kind of thing you were just asking about when the light bulb comes on. You were
Mhm.
acting in you were asking in the context of counseling,
Yeah.
but coaching is the same thing.
Yeah.
And seeing somebody have doubts and then take a risk and do it, and then say, and then be a success at it and say,
Mhm.
hey, I did something very cool here.
Say, it sounds so powerful to watch someone just not sure of themselves find that self-confidence.
It really is in both coaching and counseling, but it's more um, it happens more quickly and more
Mhm.
obviously in coaching.
Yeah.
In counseling, sometimes you don't know
Mhm.
if you've taken somebody in the right direction or if you've asked the right questions or if they're going to benefit by your help.
Mhm.
And sometimes it takes a long time to see that, if you ever do.
Yeah.
Um, but in coaching, you see it very quickly.
Say, you mentioned that, middle school, high school, there's a lot of angst there. I just was writing a script for a different episode that's just me about how change can be so challenging and so difficult.
Mm-hmm.
And all of the different difficult changes that I've had in my life. And moving to Indonesia the second time, which was the time that I met you,
Hmm.
was probably one of the hardest moves I had ever done because I had lost my uncle, I had lost my grandma, and then I lost my childhood dog in quarantine during that move.
Mm.
And
I,
so that whole year, I was lost and confused and grieving and had no idea what to do with all of the anxiety and pain. And I just remember channeling it into my schooling and into my
Mhm.
sports
Yeah,
of like, this is how I'm going to survive this. But then
yeah,
anytime anything went wrong, I'd freak out because obviously I wasn't okay internally.
yeah.
And I just have memories of going into your office. And I think you were the first person in my life to be like, okay, well, let's just look at it. Let's just lay it out. Let's just see what's there. Yep. Okay. See all this? You're fine. It's okay. Like
Yeah,
it wasn't like just move through it or just ignore it or it'll be okay. Like you actually slowed down in it first
good.
and then helped show me that it was okay so that I could trust it and believe it for myself. And I don't know, but that every time that I'm really freaking out in my head, I hear your voice in the back of my head being like, "Well, let's just look at it real quick. Let's just see what's here. See, look, you can do this. It's fine. You'll figure it out." And then I always do.
Well, maybe it's a little egotistical, but I love that I was able to have that influence on you and that it did some good. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. You were such an influential part of my life and honestly probably a big part of how I show up in my therapy these days
Hmm.
is always like, "Well, let's just talk about what's there first. Let's just
Yeah.
put it all out on the table, look at it, and then decide how we want to
Yeah.
feel about it."
Yeah. Oh, that's great. I'm really glad to hear that you do that
Mhm.
and that it's working for you and your clients.
Yeah. So, all of my clients are benefiting from how incredible of a counselor you are.
Well, I'm glad to hear that we're good partners in this.
Mhm. Yeah. One of the things that you had mentioned when I first introduced this idea of you coming on this podcast was that we didn't just learn from you, but you learned a lot from your students. And I was curious what your takeaways were from us. What did you learn from me?
Well, just, you know, all of us in life say things to people to help them, but seeing someone like you take a risk and succeed like that comes back to me and said, okay, what have you done? What risk have you taken recently? And what can you do that you don't think you can do? So it's really sort of feedback to examine myself. And I got a lot of that from working with students on different issues, saying, okay, so how do you feel about that, Mark? Um, what could or would you do in that situation? Um, the other thing I wanted to mention is that the biggest thing I learned from students and from counseling is the power and beauty of listening. Sometimes that's all you have to do
Mhm.
to let people talk and know that you're interested. And they often talk themselves through the issue. Yeah, you know this as well as I do. Um, Hear what they're saying to themselves. As they process it and try and get you to understand it, it helps them understand it more too, just telling the story. Not always, but I love it when it does. Um, and come up with their own solutions with a
Yeah.
little guidance from you. Um, I also translate that into my private life, my social life. So what I learned from the students about listening, I bring into my with my friends and with my acquaintances and people I meet, especially somebody I'm meeting for the first time. Uh, Listening shows respect and interest. Um, I try to listen more than I talk. Somebody once said, "You don't learn from talking; you learn a lot more from listening." So,
People love talking about themselves, though, so
oh
it's really
gosh,
easy to
yes.
listen if that's what you want to do.
That's true. But the other thing is if you really listen, um, I'll tell you a quick story. If and this is maybe off the track a little bit, but I'll come back.
Okay.
Um,
There is no track here. We're good.
okay. Um, I have a good friend of I hate to say this because it reveals my age, of 50 years he's been a good friend. We
Oh,
were extremely young when we started friendship. Um,
babies, basically.
that's right, we were babies. Um, he and I are complete opposites politically.
Hmm.
And in many of our beliefs, we're complete opposites. We love each other, but especially in politics, we couldn't be further apart. And when we're together, we see each other about once a month or once every 2 months. And when we're together, we don't talk politics. It just isn't part of our conversation. I know once he was trying to make a comment and you saw him jump a little bit. His wife had kicked him under the table, saying, "No, we're not doing that." So I said, okay, we really want to talk about this. And so let's go to lunch and talk about our differences politically. I said, but we have rules. Um, when you're talking, I listen. I don't formulate my argument. I just listen and try to understand. If I ask questions, they have to be questions that'll help me understand, not challenge your beliefs. And then I get to do that. Same thing. And I'll tell you what, the other thing listening does is it helps you, it should be obvious, it helps you understand. We came away understanding that we had a whole lot more in common with our beliefs than we did differences because we took the chance to listen to each other. And that's probably the biggest takeaway about listening that I've ever had.
Wow. I I'm so grateful that you shared that story, especially with how divisive the world is becoming and
Yeah.
everybody seems to be on opposing sides versus, we are all human and we are all just trying to figure out how we need to survive. We just have different ideas of what that looks like. And deep underneath it, there's so much more in common.
Oh, there is. And that's true with, not to go too deeply in it too, but that's true with religion,
Mhm.
politics, that if people would sit down and listen, um, and have rules like we did, it's an eye opener. It's
Mhm.
like you said, we came away saying, "My gosh, we agree on so many things. How could we be so opposite?" And it was really an eye opener to both of us.
I'm a couples therapist, and I have this couples resource that I do where it basically breaks down the steps of having a conversation in more detail than anybody ever wanted. And one of the steps is taking turns sharing your reality.
Mm.
So even if it's the
Mhm.
same event, you're sharing it through your eyes and you're
Yes.
not trying to make any assumptions about what they were going through or what they were thinking or how they were reacting.
Mhm.
And time again, when I have my couples do this exercise, there's always at least one partner who's like, "Well, they were really stressed, so I had to react this way." It's like, but they just shared their reality and they said they weren't stressed at all. So where is the stress coming from? It's like, "Oh, well, I was stressed." And that's why
Mm.
I was trying to figure it out. And so often we're seeing our own perspective, but through the filter of what we think the other person is experiencing.
Yes.
And it's the
Yes.
same with decisive topics.
I'm sure you've had this experience with couples, and having them look at the same issue or the same. People can watch the same event, two of you sitting side by side and watch the same event, and having completely different reactions to it.
Mhm.
Um, and that's some of what happened to me when we traveled from one country to the other, Norway to Egypt.
Mhm.
Um, I learned not to bring preconceived notions with me, not to judge until I know a lot about
Yeah.
where I am and who I'm with. Um, that's probably the biggest takeaway I have from living overseas. I thought it was going to be like this in Egypt. I thought Egyptian people were going to be like this.
Mhm.
And it really taught me to say, stop, be open, and receive what they have.
Mhm.
Don't just stay closed and assume
Yeah.
uh, what they're like and what people are like. So that was a really good thing about being overseas.
Mhm. It's
The other thing I
very
learned from
humbling.
counseling, yeah, well, it really is. Um, because like I said, I wanted to turn around and go back to Norway at first. But there was a lot of difficulty getting used to a completely opposite life in Egypt. But we stayed for 10 years. Why? Well, because we got fascinated and we liked it.
Mm.
Um, the other thing you were talking about, if I can come back to counseling and what I took from it, um, I've also learned that most of us tend to underestimate ourselves, me included. Um,
Me included in that too. Yeah.
and helping them see what they can do. Not that we're heroes in any way, but helping them see what they can do and then watch them take a risk, especially, and do it. It's a lot of fun.
Mm.
Um, I think, and you can confirm this or not, but me as a counselor, I get as much satisfaction out of somebody learning to take a risk and succeeding as they do.
Mhm. Even if
It's,
the risk is just finally feeling that one feeling they've been putting off forever. I'm like, oh, but
yeah.
you're doing it and you're surviving it, and now you're gonna get see the other side, and it's gonna be amazing.
Well, I've done a lot of college counseling, and I continue privately now to do that. Um, and when we're writing, trying to get ideas, brainstorming ideas for what they would write in their essay, their main essay, which is supposed to tell colleges about themselves something that isn't in the rest of the application. So, what is there about me that's so when I ask those questions, I'll help lead them to brainstorming. And I say, okay, what's something that makes you a little bit different? Or what's something you're good at? Um, and other questions like that. And so often I get a shoulder shrug. See, I
Mhm.
don't know, I'm not special. And boy, is this the fun part of doing this kind of counseling. I'll start talking to them about, okay, what do you like to do? And it turns out one of the students loved to tinker with bicycles. He just loved mechanics, and he made a bicycle out of spare parts from the ground up, um, constructed it. And I said, well, that's interesting. So realizing that they are unique and that they do have talents and that they're special in lots of ways, it's really fun to see them write these essays and say, "Oh, yeah, I can do that. I can write an essay about that."
Well, and
Um,
I love what you're saying too, because it's like taking something that feels so simple that maybe we've discounted in our heads and giving value to it.
mhm. Yeah. one of my students, some have spectacular stories. And so they feel like they have to have a spectacular story. One of my students really liked sitting in her room, looking out the window at nature, at the trees and the grass and the once in a while animals and birds and everything. And she would uh, really observe and not think, just observe all of this. And then she would write poetry about it. And but she didn't even mention that until I started talking a little bit more with her because she didn't think it was important. She didn't think she was anything special. And I said, yeah, it is. It's interesting. I find it interesting, and so will a college admissions person.
Yeah.
But most of all, she got some affirmation that, oh, well, maybe this is different than everybody else. Maybe I have some special.
It's like you're just uncovering what's already there and helping them
Yes.
see it. Do you think that that helps them then feel like they can take that risk, or are there other parts to building that kind of confidence?
Well, first of all, as an experienced college counselor, to say, who knows admissions people, to say, oh, yeah, that's going to be interesting to them because it's a piece of who you are. And that's exactly what they want to find out.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it also, I can say, of all my students that I'm working with now, nobody else has told me about that, about doing that kind of thing. So you are unique. And then they start to say, oh, yeah, maybe I am. But the biggest piece is when they write the essay, they put
Okay.
it down on paper and they write the story and they can see it. Um, and that's what's cool because it really does help them see themselves differently very
Yeah.
often.
Yeah, it brings the power to the story because it's not just something in their heads that they're doing, it is something that they're actually choosing to share.
Now, I can't say we all do that, but I can speak for myself. Um, i- i- Having the same kinds of reactions and having the same kind of enlightenment when somebody says, oh, yeah, no, I thought this was really cool about you. Or when you did this, um, this is what this is what I remember that really makes you you. And then you start to think, because we don't think about ourselves very much, I think, and what power we have. And when someone tells you, like, as you've done to me, it's like, oh yeah, oh yeah. So I love that
Yeah.
part of counseling and of
Yeah.
doing the college part
So
as
you
well.
might not have an answer for this, but I'm curious, what makes you you?
Ooh, really good question. Part of what makes me me is I I'm not sure I can do this without sounding egotistical.
Do it, embrace it. It's an
I,
egotistical question. I'm asking you about
yeah,
yourself.
sure.
Embrace it.
I'm a good, caring person. I'm proud of that
Mm,
because it's genuine. And I love to find out about people. That helps make me me and learn from them. That's what the listening is all about. It's not just about making them feel good, quote unquote. Um, but by listening to other people, I learned so much about myself. Um, what else makes me me? My overseas experience. I talked to you a minute ago about um, something that's become a really big part of me, and that is not to judge people.
mm,
Um, Somebody in traffic um, turns in front of me or passes me and then cuts in or speeds by me. I'm better than I used to be at not getting angry and saying, oh, what a jerk,
yeah.
because I don't know their story.
Mm,
I don't know if they're hurrying home because they just got a call from their kids or wives that there's an emergency at home. Um, I don't know what they have going on in their lives too
yeah.
that just makes them angry enough to drive like that. So I'm a lot better at that.
I purposefully assume that everybody is on their way to the hospital for some pregnancy. Just
That's good.
you go make it in time. You got this, just as my automatic assumption now, just on
Mhm.
purpose.
I think another thing that makes me me is gratitude.
Mm,
The older I get, the less I take for granted. And I every morning when I get up, I do. some kind of meditation. And most of the time it's going outside and just watch, like the student that I told you about, just not saying or thinking, just watching the birds,
Mm.
the sun come up. It sounds really hokey, but it's just sort of peaceful. And if I can remember it, I say every morning, I start it by saying, when I wake up, I realize what a precious privilege it is to be alive, to breathe,
Mm.
to think, to enjoy, and to love. And I want to carry that with me all day. I don't always succeed, but that's a big part of it, gratitude.
Oh, I love that. What are you grateful for right now in your life? Being alive, obviously, but
Yeah,
what else?
okay. Besides that, my wife,
Yeah.
who naturally is adventurous and happy and kind and all of those things. And just by watching her example, um, makes me more like that. Uh,
Mm.
in some ways, it makes me feel inferior sometimes because, like, gosh, how do I measure? How do I be like her? How do I measure up to that? But I've found peace in that I don't have to. You've got your own things that are cool about you. We went to Hawaii once, and I thought I would like it because of the touristy things. You
Hmm.
know, the palm trees and the beaches and the flowered shirts and all of that. I fell in love with Hawaii, but not because of that. There's a spirituality there that I can't describe.
Hmm.
Um, and again, this might sound a little corny to some people, but I don't care because you felt it. It wasn't like any place I've ever been before. Um, I want to put this in a way that doesn't sound normal. The kindness, but it isn't just that. It was they carry there's a big respect for, as you called it once, the universe or nature, or whoever it may be that the world got this way.
Just existence.
Yeah, and they carry that around with them. They're just pleased to be here,
Hmm.
and it's contagious. Um, when somebody's waiting in a parking lot, there's a very pedantic kind of an example, but when somebody's waiting to come out onto the road in a parking lot, it doesn't matter whether the light is green or red or whether you've got 10 cars behind you, you stop and you let them in, period. Just because it's what people are supposed to do for each other. And that's the kind of, of place it is. But what I really wanted to say is that um, that meditation kind of thing, it's a way of life for them to appreciate and to understand that they're fortunate people. So I was in this, I don't know if you call it a labyrinth or not, but it was a circle and it was supposed to be something fairly spiritual, right? You start in the center and you walk around not thinking, just walk around. It's like meditation in a sense, and you walk until the exit happens. And trust me, this happened. I walked out and suddenly in my head was be happy, be grateful, and be kind. I wasn't thinking about anything like that, but there it was. And that's why I love Hawaii. Those kind of things just happen. And so that's what are my dreams? Want to do that.
Oh, I love it so much. And just hearing you tell that story, I'm realizing with all the move and all the chaos and all the stuff I'm doing in
Yeah.
my life right now, I've been so stuck in the details of it all.
Yeah.
And hearing you share the gratitude and how you slow down and appreciate life, my mind is like, I do have a lot to be grateful for. I do just want to slow down. I just want to
I know.
I love existence and I love that I'm here and I love that I'm doing it. And it's just like everything you are sharing is just washing over me.
Well, it's so I'm like you. I'm a details person. I make lists. Oh my gosh, I make lists just so I can cross them out and feel like I've accomplished something. And it's so easy to get caught up in lists and in accomplishments and getting this done and getting that done. That's why I sit every morning and say,
Yeah.
okay, I want to start the morning that way. And and just call my attention to, okay, this is cool that you're here. And that you have this kind of life. All right, now I can go about the day. And
Hmm.
it's just a good reminder.
Um, that labyrinth that you did in Hawaii, was it on
Mhm.
Oahu?
Yes.
Was it like on the coast with all the black rocks? Or was it a different one?
No, I don't remember where it was exactly,
Okay.
but it was a circular,
Yeah.
and it was bushes,
Okay.
um, and flowers, and you just walked in between those
Okay.
in
I
a
say I did a
circle.
stone one, but a part of me is like, we both did meditative walking labyrinths in Hawaii.
Yeah,
I just love that connection there just for a second.
I'm not surprised. We have, as I'm finding out, we have other things in common too.
We have quite
Uh,
a bit in common.
and I too have to stop myself during the day and say, okay, hang on.
Yeah.
You don't need to do this. This is all right.
Mhm. What helps you do that? What helps you stop and be like, wait, I'm stuck in the details again. Let me kind of rise above that and just enjoy existence.
Well, one thing is having that meditation
Hmm.
at the ready and living in it, starting the day with it. And one thing I love about it is it's simple. It- be happy, be grateful, and be kind. And so getting used to carrying that with me, and it'll come up when I get most stressed. It'll come up and say, okay, every morning I wake up with an appreciation that I'm alive and rest of that. So, but how am I able to, excuse me, stop and do that? Because,
Yeah.
you just get caught up in everything and stopping
Hmm.
doesn't come into your mind. Well, I credit counseling with that. I think everybody ought to have some counseling just to learn how to live with life.
Hmm.
It's so enlightening for me. And this person who talked through all this with me, um, and asked, why do you get caught up in things? What do you think motivates that? And so on. And just helping me get to the center of it. Um, she helped me learn how to stop. I can't explain exactly how or what that was, how we came to that because it was pretty complex, but that was one of the beautiful things that I got from her is to be able to recognize the signs
Hmm.
and be able to get the red light and say, okay, hang on.
Yeah.
And it took practice, certainly took practice.
Well, and I'm curious if this matches for your experience, because like when I get stuck in my head or I get stuck in the details,
Mhm.
this part of me almost tries to convince me that I have to stay there. Like, no, you
Yeah.
have to keep paying attention. You have to keep doing this. You can't relax. You can't slow down. And it's like a big part of what breaks it for me is reminding myself that even though my thoughts are telling me that, it doesn't have to be true. And
Yeah.
maybe it is okay for me to pause or slow down or take a break, and nothing is actually going to fall apart. It might actually get better.
Well, that's the way to success, right? Pushing, accomplishing, all that kind of thing. Um, when I was in, this is one of the reasons I became this way. When I was in high school, I was the class president and I was the captain of the football and baseball teams. I was the homecoming king. And all of that sort of put me on a path along with my dad, put me on a path to saying, okay, achieve, get this right. Buckle down until you can, until you, yeah, until you do more, until you get to the next step and then buckle down
It's
more.
never over.
No, it's never over. And that's a beautiful way to say it because who wants to be stuck in something like that that's never over? And that
Mhm.
was big enlightenment to me when I was talking with that counselor, and saying, "Yeah, you're right. It's just never over." And she asked me, "What keeps you doing that? What keeps you in that place?" And I said, "I've been brought up with it, and so on." She said, "Does it have anything to do with ego?" And I didn't want to say yes, but what do I get from the achievement? Positive reinforcement, compliments, um, the sense that I've gotten it done, but at what cost? And so I wish I'd have known when I was 20 what I know now. Um, and that is, what's the value? What's the
Yeah.
perspective? What is really important?
Mhm.
Uh, and that's why I'd like everyone to get some kind of counseling or guidance early on. You can realize that before you get to be
Yeah.
retired, older age.
So, one of the big insights that I had through my counseling
Mhm.
was all of the parts of me that weren't helpful for that, like
Mhm.
didn't help me succeed, didn't help me achieve anything, that were just sad or grieving or, dealing with pain, that they just needed to go somewhere else. Like I didn't want them there. I didn't want them to exist. And I
Yeah.
just ignored them. And counseling, what came out was like they needed space to show up. And so a lot of my counseling, my therapy sessions were just, this sadness has been inside of me since I was 16 years old and I never let it exist. Let's just be sad for an hour. Let's just be sad for a couple weeks. Let's just finally let this part of you out so that you can finally move through it and realize that you actually did get through that sad point in your life instead of holding on to it forever. You can just let it go if you actually let it exist.
Yeah. And so often we feel like if I'm not sad, if I push it away, then it won't be there.
Yeah.
But it is.
Hmm.
Even if it feels like you've pushed it away, and even if it feels like you're over it, there's a trigger out there somewhere with the next experience
Hmm.
that would bring you right back there.
And just because you have sad moments doesn't mean that you can't have gratitude for life or
Mm.
enjoy existence or look out the window and see that bird that you would have missed if you had been so focused on pushing it down and just getting through the next step.
Yeah, that's really good.
Hmm.
It's true. You miss so much by being intense and by speeding through life. And that it took me a lot of years and into my retirement to figure that out. And it's because in my retirement, I can slow down. And so it's much easier to do that and to see, to naturally slow down and to see those things.
So even though you're saying you hadn't figured it out yet, you're one of the people I credit in helping me figure out that I could slow down.
Well, I realized the importance of it, but wasn't always able to do it, like many of us.
Oh yeah. So thinking about retirement, I mean, I know you're still doing some college counseling here and there, but I'm curious about what you are currently working towards, what your dreams are. Like, what does retirement mean for you?
I'm still busy in retirement. Sometimes they say, boy, I'm as busy as when I was working. But the difference is I'm busy with things I want to do and love to do and have the freedom to do. And so one of my dreams is not to get caught up as I've worked all my life
Yeah.
to achieve and to do a good job and to get praise for that and all of that kind of stuff. And so one of my dreams is to not do that, is to just do all those things that I've talked to other people about it doing and that I got from my counselor, to really do that. The other is to live as long as I can with my wife because she's terrific and we have a
Mhm.
terrific relationship. And
I love that.
to remind myself and to never forget Hawaii and what I learned there.
Yeah. Just always return to Hawaii, slow it down,
Yeah, yeah, that's
just
right.
embrace that energy.
Mhm.
Uh,
But the big difference is that I'm still busy, but I have my own control over my time
mhm.
and a lot of freedom.
You get to decide what busy looks like.
That's right.
Yeah.
Exactly right.
I'm trying to cultivate that even though I'm not retired yet.
Yeah, well, that's a great thing. Like I say, I wish I'd have known when I was
Mhm.
20 what I realize now.
I learned it out of necessity.
Huh.
I
Yeah.
My anxiety was way too high, and I ended up having chronic pain. I got daily
Oh.
debilitating headaches for almost a decade,
Mm.
and it hit its peak while I was working at the crisis center, to the point that like I could not function by the end of a workday. And so it was one of those of like either I find a way to work less or I just accept that I'm gonna break my body
Mm.
before I'm even close to retirement. Um,
What made you realize that it was a uh, emotional or mental thing as opposed to a physical ailment.
So it's a little bit of both. I have severe TMJ. And so my jaw was too far back and off to the left.
Hmm.
So anytime I was extra anxious, I'd clench more. And because it was in the wrong spot, it was
Yeah.
creating all of this stuff, just migraines and auras. And I get numbness like down one half of my face when migraines hit sometimes. Like it's terrifying. I feel like
Yeah.
I'm dying when it happens.
Yeah.
Um, and for a decade, all the doctors just kept saying, well, you're just stressed and drink more water and do more yoga and sleep
Mhm.
better.
Mhm.
But it never actually went away. And so I have one orthodontist, Dr. Pollock in Colorado. She is amazing. I will follow her to the ends of the earth at this point. But she heard me, she saw me. She actually diagnosed what was wrong. And I was in treatment for it for 5 years
Mm.
before things started settling down.
Yeah.
And so, even though I don't get daily headaches anymore, if my stress is higher, I clench more, my TMJ can like create some symptoms.
Mhm.
But now I know where it's coming from. Like I can feel the cramping in my neck, I get the cramping down my jaw, and then I know, okay, I need to slow down. I'm starting to get caught up in the details. Like I can, my body talks to me. And because a lot of it has been healed, it is now more psychologically based when I get symptoms
Yeah.
and not just all the time.
It's it's just so cool when you've been ailing for so long and not knowing what it is and worrying about what it is. When you get a diagnosis like that, and then you have a way to control, you know what it is, and you have a way to control it, that you have some power over it. Boy, that's
Yeah.
such a relief.
I cried so hard in her office the day that they were like, hey, do you have all of these symptoms? I'm like, yeah. They're like, so that's this, and just bawling. Like, you're not just telling me that I'm anxious, that I need to like drink more water. They're like, no, there is something actually wrong with you. I felt so seen that day.
Boy, yeah, I don't know if this is the proper time or place to do it, but I have a very similar experience.
Yeah. If you want
For
to share, you're welcome to.
well, for 2 or 3 years, I had these, all I can call them as wonky episodes. Try crossing your eyes for about 5 or 10 seconds, and
Mm.
I would do that. I would have that, and I started to worry. Every day I woke up thinking, "Is this the day I have a stroke?
Mm.
Is this the day I die?" Um, and I thought about it constantly for 2 or 3 years. Went into the doctors and hospitals, and same thing. Basically, it was, well, we're just not sure exactly, but I think it's this. We think it's
Mm.
this. And basically, it was get counseling and take care of yourself.
Yeah.
Well, after another year of that, Betsy said, okay, enough, enough. We're going to Mayo. And I said, no, we don't need, yes, we do. Put her foot down and said, we're going. So we did. And I also had amnesic episodes now and then.
Mm.
And
Terrifying.
couldn't, I woke up not knowing where we were, what I was doing, why I was there, and so on. And went to the doctor in Minnesota, and two neurologists were interviewing me. And right in front of them, I had one of these episodes. I just went blank, no expression, about 15 seconds. So they, beautiful thing. They saw it in
Mhm.
happening. So I got wired up. I got every test in the world, um, and eventually they came out and said, "Okay, this is what this is."
Wow.
And I said, "Are you sure?" And they said, "Yep." And it can be easily controlled with medication. And I did what you did. I just sobbed because it was like, ah,
Having that answer, sometimes it's everything.
everything. I'm not crazy about taking medication,
Mm-mm.
but they said there's 94% chance with this medication you'll never have another one, and we know what it is. And like you said, just the knowing was incredible. And I think that's why you and I, part of it, have that gratitude. That was a huge part of both of our lives.
Well, not only that, but we're both people that get stuck in the details and get stuck in the story
Mhm.
that have
Mhm.
found the ability to leave it. to slow
Yeah.
down and to just exist for a second. That is such, oh, it's such a powerful tool just for nervous system regulation, for
Yeah.
feeling like yourself.
Yeah.
Like, I never want to lose that ability.
Yeah. And you asked me what makes me stop and think about all of this. And that's it. I will never forget that moment. And so as long as I can keep that handy, then I'll be able to stop and take care of myself.
I want to share so much gratitude for this conversation that we are having because I had no idea what we were going to get out of this, but I feel so connected to you. I feel gratitude for this relationship that we have. And I am so happy that you agreed to meet with me and talk with me today.
Well, me too. This has been so much fun to see you again. And it's also really fun that we can have conversations as colleagues and adults, um, rather than just teacher student or counselor student, which was terrific for me too when we did that.
That's good
But
because I mostly just remember
no,
panicking at you.
no, it really was. You were just a cool person, and it was so much fun to get to know you. Um, well, and that's as a coach too. And what I saw in by getting to know you was the reason that you were a pitcher for us, because I knew you could do that. Um, but this is really fun for me too, that we're not just colleagues, but we're fellow adults who can catch
Yeah.
up and talk to each other again, be friends.
Yeah. Yes, I agree with that. I'm so, so glad that you are in my life and not just from the past 15 years ago, but
Yeah,
like right here, right now that we were able to reconnect. I'm so glad that social media exists for those reasons.
yeah.
I think so many of my friends I would have just lost because of, living internationally,
Mhm.
that this world we live in allows us to keep these connections.
There is a group from Norway of our teachers, small school, but it was this was 1977. I first went to Norway, and we get together every 2 years, and there are 30 to 35 of us who religiously come. Um, and it's because of that kind of connection.
Mhm.
And social media helped us do that, stay in touch so we could organize this kind of thing.
Yeah.
But getting back to it, at the risk of this sounding like a mutual admiration, um,
I'm
really
okay with
proud,
love fests. It's fine.
really, I'm really proud of what you've done, and forging this kind of career, and especially the self-awareness that you've talked to me about before
Yeah.
we went into the recording. It's just cool and good fun for me. And
Yeah.
thank you for making that effort to reconnect.
I'm just glad you were able to meet me in it. Because, like, I mean, same as how you talk about it, every time I have a session or do something professionally, my
Mhm.
mind immediately goes to, okay, but what about me? How does this relate to me? How can I grow? What
Hmm.
don't I know yet? Right.
Yeah.
And that's why I started this podcast because I love hearing people's stories. But I wanted to be able to hear people's stories in a way that I also got to share and I also got to connect.
Mhm.
And it's like this moving through time together, no matter who you are or where you are in your life. Like I want to be connected to you, you know?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. It's powerful and it's fun.
Yeah. So, as we're kind of wrapping up this hour, I'm curious if there was anything we didn't talk about that you wanted to share, any advice for being on this human journey, just anything that we missed that is on your brain.
Not that we missed connections, staying centered, like I'm able to do with that two short sentences. How grateful I am to be alive, to breathe, to think, to love, and enjoy. And that kind of thing, it's a little different for everybody, but that keeps me centered and keeps me knowing how I how I want to live my life and what's important in it.
I think that's just a great intention for the rest of this week for me. I'm just going to take that. I'm going to take
Yeah.
that little sound clip and just put it on my phone and just hit play every time I need to hear your voice. Just centered, grounded, enjoy life. It's okay.
Well, for people like us, it's important.
hmm Thank you for joining me on Insights with Us.
You're completely welcome. I had a great time.
It isn't often that we get the chance to talk to an important person from our past and meet as equals in the present. I cannot even begin to explain the gratitude that I feel for Mr. Gathercole, all that he has done for me, and all the other lives that I'm sure he has influenced. And I'm really excited that you were all able to connect with us too. Hopefully something we talked about today resonated with you. If it did, let yourself sit with that idea for a little while longer. If you have questions for this podcast or any themes you'd like us to focus on in the future, send us a message on Instagram at Insights With Us Podcast, or send us an email at insightswithus@gmail.com. If you've enjoyed this podcast and want to hear more, please follow, like, or subscribe. If you want to support the continuation of this podcast, you can donate. To do so, visit my website and donate on Podbean's Patron program, or find me, Anastasia Soroka, on buymeacoffee.com. I appreciate you, and I appreciate that you are listening. Thank you for creating insight with us.